So imagine this, controlling 10 grand worth of stock for just 200 bucks. Sounds like a total scam, right? Like one of those too good to be true late night infomercials. But here's the thing. It's actually a completely legitimate financial tool that's been around for decades. We're talking about options.
Welcome to today's explainer. We're going to completely demystify options. We'll break down exactly how they really work, the hidden market forces that are, quite frankly, constantly working against you, and the very real risks that those flashy beginner tutorials usually just skip right over. We're taking that dense Wall Street jargon and translating it into plain, actionable reality. We've got a lot of fascinating ground to cover in this explainer. We'll kick things off with a simple house deposit analogy, move into calls and puts, tackle that tricky break-even hurdle, uncover the hidden forces of time and volatility, look at how people actually make money, and wrap up with real uses and a few final warnings. Let's get right into it. All right, Section 1, the house deposit analogy. To keep us out of the financial weeds right off the bat, let's just look at a normal real estate scenario. Say you find a house you absolutely love. You're not totally ready to buy it today, but you definitely don't want anyone else snatching it up. So what do? You pay the seller a $2,000 non-refundable deposit. And that deposit gives you a pretty awesome superpower, the right to buy that exact house at today's price anytime in the next 3 months. If the neighborhood suddenly booms and the value skyrockets, you still get it at that locked-in price. But if you just change your mind, you walk away. You only lose your $2,000 deposit and absolutely nothing more. You didn't buy the house, you just bought the right to buy it. Now, what's really fascinating here is how perfectly that simple house deposit maps straight onto the core vocabulary of an options contract. In the stock market, options are bundled up in batches of 100 shares. That upfront cost you pay, your non-refundable deposit, is called the premium. Let's say it's $2 a share, making it $200 total for the contract. Your locked-in purchase price, that's the strike price. We'll set ours at $100. And that strict 3-month window you had, that is your expiration date. Once that date passes, the contract is literally worthless. Moving on to Section 2, calls, puts, and scenarios. To see how this all plays out in the real world, let's bring in a fictional buyer. We'll call her Anna, and an institutional seller named Marco. There are basically 2 main flavors of options you need to know about. First up, a call option. This is what Anna buys when she expects a stock to go up. It gives her the right to buy at the strike price. On the flip side, a put option gives the buyer the right to sell at the strike price. So Anna would grab a put if she thinks the stock is going to tank, which lets her sell shares at a high strike price even if the market completely crashes. Let's look at how these exact same market movements impact our 2 characters. Say Anna buys a call option with a $100 strike for $200 premium. If the stock rockets up to $120, she can buy her 100 shares at just $100, instantly locking in $2,000 of value. Subtract her $200 premium, and boom, she just made an $1,800 profit from a $200 investment. I mean, that is the magic of leverage. But look at Marco, the seller. He has to actually provide those shares at $100, meaning he essentially loses that $1,800. But if the stock just stays flat or crashes down to 50, Anna simply lets the option expire. Her max loss is just her $200 premium. Marco, in those flat or down scenarios, just pockets her $200 as pure profit. Let's really zoom in on this dynamic for a second. This asymmetry is the whole reason buying options is so appealing for Anna. Her risk is firmly capped at exactly what she paid, while her potential gain is theoretically limitless if the stock just goes to the moon. Marco, though, he's playing a totally different game. He's acting a lot like an insurance company. His upside profit is strictly capped at that small $200 premium, but in exchange, he's taking on a theoretically unlimited downward risk if the stock explodes upward. All right, Section 3, the break-even hurdle. Now, you might be thinking Anna wins the second the stock goes a single penny above her $100 strike price, right? Well, when you look at an options chain, you're going to see these 3 phrases everywhere. For a call option, if the stock is above the strike, it's in the money because it has actual immediate value. At the money just means they're exactly equal, and out of the money means the stock is below the strike, so exercising it would make absolutely 0 sense. But here is the trap. Being in the money at expiration doesn't automatically mean Anna makes a profit. Here's the crucial point. Anna's true break-even price is actually $102 per share. Why? Because the stock has to rise enough to cover her $100 strike price plus the $2 per share premium she already paid just to get into the trade. Think about it. If the stock finishes at 101, yeah, she's in the money by $1 per share, which gets her $100 back. But since she originally paid $200, she's still down $100 overall. The premium isn't just some small fee. It is a mathematical hurdle that your stock prediction literally has to leap over.
Which brings us to Section 4, Hidden Forces, Time and Volatility. Now, we really need to talk about the two hidden villains that silently eat away at a beginner's investment every single day. Villain number one is time decay. See, when Anna pays that $200 premium, she's actually paying for time value, the possibility that the stock might move. Picture that $200 sitting right on a lit fuse. If the stock just sits totally flat for 3 weeks, her option loses value every single day, simply because there's less time left for her prediction to actually happen. And this decay, it's not a straight line. It accelerates violently in those final days and weeks. You could be entirely right about a stock going up eventually, but if you run out of time on your contract, your investment goes straight to zero. The second hidden force is implied volatility. Think of options sort of like hurricane insurance. If a massive storm is brewing, say a highly anticipated corporate earnings report, the market gets spooked, and the insurance premiums for options get incredibly expensive. But here is the major catch. The moment that earnings report drops and the fear vanishes, we see what's called a volatility crush. Anna could buy an option for $200 during peak fear. The stock could stay perfectly flat, but because that fear just evaporated overnight, poof, her options value might collapse instantly down to $80. Let's get into Section 5, How People Actually Make Money. So the textbooks will usually tell you Anna's ultimate goal is to gather up a bunch of cash and actually buy those 100 shares at expiration. But we need to clear up a massive misconception here. Let's use a concert analogy. Imagine you buy a ticket to a sold-out show for $100. Suddenly, the band blows up and people are offering $500 for that ticket. Sure, you could go to the concert, or you could just act like a scalper, resell the ticket online, pocket a cool $400 in cash profit, and call it a day. In the real options market, almost nobody exercises the right to buy the shares early. Why? Because doing that instantly destroys any remaining time value left on the contract. Instead, traders treat the contract itself as the asset. They just resell it back to the market for a cash profit. And let's not forget Marco, our seller. Remember, he basically created a debt of one contract when he collected that $200 premium up front. Well, he has choices to manage his risk too. If that volatility crushes the options price down to $80, Marco can actually step in, pay the $80 to buy the contract back, and close his debt early. He locks in a clean $120 profit instantly and just walks away. Or he could wait for expiration. Crossing his fingers, the option expires worthless, so he can keep the full $200. But waiting is super dangerous. A single bad news headline tomorrow could send that stock soaring, wiping out all his gains and exposing him to some catastrophic losses. Finally, Section 6, Real Uses and Final Warnings. Okay, so we've seen just how speculative and potentially dangerous this whole ecosystem can be. You might be wondering, why do professionals even use these instruments? Well, while some people definitely treat the options market like a casino, there are 3 very practical real-world uses. First up is hedging. If you own a ton of stock and you're terrified of a market crash, you buy a put option as insurance, guaranteeing you can sell at a set price. Second is income. If you already own 100 shares, you can act like Marco and sell a covered call to collect that premium, letting time decay actually work in your favor. And third is speculation. That's using a tiny amount of capital to control a massive position, just like Anna did. Amplifying your returns, sure, but completely accepting the very high probability of total loss. But listen, if you decide to play the role of the seller just to collect some income, you're facing a terrifying hidden danger. It's called assignment risk. In the US, most options are what's called American style. This means the buyer can exercise the right at any time before the expiration date. So say a massive dividend is announced. Marco could literally wake up tomorrow morning in a cold sweat to find he's been assigned early, forced to deliver 100 shares overnight with absolutely zero warning. When we zoom out and look at this landscape as a whole, the contrast is pretty stark. Buying options offers limited risk, but theoretically unlimited, or at least substantial, profits. Though remember, time decay fights you every single step of the way, making it a pretty low probability bet. On the flip side, selling options offers high probability, smaller profits, limited strictly to the premium, but it carries the terrifying weight of unlimited or substantial catastrophic loss. I want to leave you with a really stark warning, derived directly from the source material we're exploring today. The source states it bluntly. If you are about to open a brokerage account just to start trading options as a beginner, please don't. Options are incredibly powerful financial tools, absolutely, but they are completely mathematically unforgiving. If you feel like you absolutely must, you have to start with an amount of capital you are genuinely okay with watching evaporate. Because in most beginner cases, those hidden forces of time and volatility pretty much ensure that it will. And that brings us to our final thought for this explainer. The leverage options offer is undeniably intoxicating, but the mechanics, they are ruthless. Before you ever place a single trade, you have to look in the mirror and ask yourself, do you truly understand the hidden forces of time decay, volatility crush, and assignment risk? Or are you just lighting a very expensive fuse on your own capital? Thank you so much for learning with us today. Keep asking those questions.